The phone rang at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, and that's when my life split into two distinct halves. Everything before that call and everything after. I grabbed it off the nightstand without thinking. My mother had been in and out of the hospital for months. Her heart wasn't what it used to be, and I'd trained myself to answer every call, day or night. Unknown numbers meant nothing anymore. They could be a nurse calling from a new extension or a doctor using their personal cell. Hello? My voice was thick with sleep. Your wife is mine. The man's voice was calm, almost amused, like he was telling me the score of a baseball game. She always has been. You're just a placeholder. It will all end soon. The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I could feel my pulse in my teeth. But I didn't move, didn't make a sound. Megan lay beside me, her back to me, the covers rising and falling with her breath. Too steady, too rhythmic. Like a metronome. Like someone who was very carefully pretending to be asleep. 6 years. We'd been married for 6 years. I'd held this woman while she cried about her father's death. A death I now wondered if it had even happened. I'd rubbed her feet after long days showing houses. I'd brought her soup when she was sick and held her hair back when she drank too much champagne at her office Christmas party. I'd made love to her just 8 hours ago, and she'd whispered my name like it was a prayer. And now some stranger was calling in the middle of the night, telling me none of it was real. I placed the phone back on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling until morning came. I didn't sleep. I don't think I even blinked. Here's the thing about me that most people don't understand. I'm not the type to panic. 2 deployments in Army intelligence will do that to you. You learn to take information in, process it, file it away, and wait. Gather intel. Build a picture. Don't react until you understand what you're reacting to. So when the sun came up and Megan stretched beside me, yawning that pretty little yawn she always did, I kissed her forehead like I did every morning. Sleep okay? She asked. Like the dead, I said. She smiled and headed for the shower. I made coffee. I read the news on my tablet. I watched her come downstairs in her gray pantsuit, the one that hugged her hips in a way that used to make me lose my train of thought. She grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and kissed my cheek. Long day today, showing that property in Westbrook, then dinner with the Hendersons. Don't wait up. Good luck with the Hendersons, I said. Try not to let Martha talk your ear off about her cats again. She laughed. A genuine laugh, I thought. Or maybe not. I couldn't tell anymore. I watched her car pull out of the driveway. Then I grabbed my keys, got in my own car, and drove to work. Except I didn't go to work. I parked 3 blocks from our house behind a delivery truck where I had a clear sight line to the front door, and I waited. At 9:47 a.m., Megan's car came back. She went inside. 10 minutes later, she left again and drove toward her real estate office downtown. Normal. Everything was normal. But I'd already decided I was going to find out what the hell was going on, and I was going to do it my way. Here's what you need to understand about my line of work. I'm a cybersecurity consultant now, but that's just the polished version. Before the private sector salary and the corner office, I spent 8 years in Army intelligence. 2 deployments to places that don't show up on tourist maps. Operations that still give me nightmares when the weather changes just right. The skills you learn in that life don't go away. They become part of your operating system. How to spot when someone's lying. How to build a case from fragments of information. How to stay calm when every instinct is screaming at you to react. And most importantly, how to make yourself invisible while you watch. I entered my own house like a stranger that morning. I don't know how else to describe it. Suddenly, every room felt like a crime scene, and I was looking for evidence I didn't want to find. I started in the bedroom. Nothing in her jewelry box except jewelry. Nothing under the mattress. Nothing in her sock drawer. Then I moved to the closet. It took me 20 minutes to find it, tucked into the inside pocket of a winter coat she hadn't worn since February. A phone. Cheap, prepaid thing. The kind you buy at gas stations with cash. It was off, and when I turned it on, it asked for a password. I didn't try to guess. Instead, I photographed it, front, back, model number, and put it back exactly where I'd found it, making sure the coat hung at the same angle. Then I went to the office and pretended to work while my mind ran calculations I didn't want to solve. Over the next 48 hours, I built a profile on my own wife like she was a target in one of my old intelligence briefs. I documented her schedule. Tuesdays and Thursdays were her long days. Client showings, she said, sometimes running until 8 or 9 at night. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? She was ambitious. She was successful. The commissions on those luxury properties didn't earn themselves. I noted her phone habits. She never left her main phone unattended, not even for a bathroom break. I used to think it was a quirk. Now I wondered if it was operational security. I tracked her mood. Looking back, she'd been happier the past few months, more affectionate, more interested in our future. We'd started talking about kids. I'd thought it was because we were finally ready to take that step. Maybe she was happy for other reasons. On the third day, I installed a GPS tracker on her car, not the consumer-grade garbage you find at electronics stores. Military-grade. Undetectable unless you knew exactly what to look for. An old army buddy owed me a favor, and this is how I collected. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't spiraling. I was operational. The way I survived Kandahar wasn't by making emotional decisions. It was by staying calm, gathering intel, and acting when the picture was complete. The picture was just starting to form. Day 3. The tracker pinged a location I'd never heard Megan mention. Secure Space Storage, a facility on the east side of town about 20 minutes from our house. According to the data, she'd been there for 47 minutes on Tuesday while I was at work. That night, after Megan fell asleep, I drove out to take a look. The place was exactly what you'd expect. Rows of orange roll-up doors under fluorescent lights. Security cameras that probably hadn't been serviced in years. A digital keypad on the entrance gate and another on each individual unit. Unit 247. I couldn't get in, not without raising flags, but I wrote down everything I could see. Company name, contact numbers, the layout of the cameras. You never know what's going to matter until it matters. What was she keeping in there? Why did she need storage I didn't know about? I drove home with more questions than answers. Thursday night, I met Derek Ashford for drinks at Callahan's, this old-school bar downtown where the bartenders knew our usual orders, and the TVs were always tuned to whatever game was on. Derek and I had been best friends since our freshman year at Northwestern. He'd gone to law school while I'd gone Army, but we'd stayed close. Weekly drinks. Golf when the weather allowed. He'd been my best man at the wedding. I'd been his when he married Susan, and I'd been there when they divorced 3 years later. He was a divorce attorney now, one of the best in the city, and I trusted him more than almost anyone. That night, I was testing him. I didn't even realize I was doing it until the words were already out of my mouth. "Let me ask you something," I said, swirling the bourbon in my glass. "In your line of work, you ever had a client whose spouse was living a complete double life?" Derek laughed, but there was something tight in it. He signaled the bartender for another round before answering. "More times than I can count. The quiet ones are the worst. They've usually been planning for years." "Years?" "Oh, sure." He took a long pull from his beer. "I had one case last year where the wife had a whole second family in another state. 2 kids, man. 2 kids with another guy. The husband had no idea until he walked into her book club meeting and found her with her other man and a pair of toddlers calling him daddy." I forced a chuckle. "That's insane." "People are insane, my friend. That's why I have job security." He grinned, but his eyes weren't in it. "Why do you ask? Everything okay with you and Megan?" "Fine, everything's fine. Just something a client mentioned that got me thinking." "Uh-huh." He checked his phone, typed something quickly, put it face down on the bar. I watched him as he talked. Derek was checking his phone more than usual. He laughed a little too hard at his own jokes. His eyes kept darting to the door like he was expecting someone. "Hot date later?" I asked, nodding at his phone. "What?" "No, just work stuff. You know how it is." Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe the phone call had scrambled my radar. Or maybe not. Day 5. The second call came at 11:23 p.m. Megan was at a client dinner. One of her regulars, she'd said. A developer who was always looking at new investment properties. Same unknown number. "She told me about your mother's birthday," the voice said. Same calm tone, same hint of amusement. "That little Italian place you're taking her to Saturday. Cute. Enjoy these last family moments, placeholder." Click. I sat in the dark living room for a long time after that, my mind running through possibilities. The caller knew about my mother's birthday dinner. I'd only discussed that with Megan 2 days ago, inside the house. There was no way anyone could have overheard unless... I spent the next 3 hours sweeping every room for bugs. I checked light fixtures, power outlets, smoke detectors. I ran diagnostics on my phone. Clean. All of it was clean. Which meant one of two things. Either someone had access I couldn't detect, or Megan was feeding the caller information directly. Neither option was good. I called in a favor I'd been saving for a rainy day. Wallace Drake was 55 years old, built like a refrigerator, and had retired from the FBI under circumstances that nobody talked about. We'd met during a joint operation overseas that remained classified to this day. He owed me for something I wasn't allowed to remember in official contexts, and when I explained my situation, he agreed to help. "Storage unit?" Wallace said when we met at a diner across town. "That's easy. I can have records by tomorrow. I need to know who rented it, when, and how it's being paid for." "Done. What else?" I slid my phone across the table and showed him the photos of the burner phone. "I need to know if there's a way to access the contents without tipping her off that I've been looking." Wallace studied the image. "Possible, but risky. If she's checking it regularly, she might notice the battery drain or some other indicator. Better to wait. Track her patterns. See when she uses it, and for what." I nodded. Wallace was right. Patience was the game now. "There's one more thing," I said. "The caller. I need to know who's on the other end of those calls." "You saved the number?" "Yeah, but it's going to be a burner. Probably a dead end." Wallace smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Everything's a dead end until it isn't. Let me work on it." The storage unit was registered to Megan Whitmore, her maiden name. Rented 18 months ago, paid in cash every month. Wallace and I staked out the facility for 3 days before she showed. On day 10, at 2:15 p.m., her silver Lexus pulled into the lot. She used a key card to access the gate, then walked straight to Unit 247 like she'd done it 100 times. She was inside for 22 minutes. When she came out, she wasn't carrying anything. Wallace followed her from there while I stayed behind, watching the unit like it might reveal its secrets through sheer willpower. His report came that evening. She went straight home, cooked dinner, watched TV with me. We made love that night, and she whispered that she loved me, and I wondered if any of it was real. 22 minutes. What do you do in a storage unit for 22 minutes if you're not taking anything or putting anything away? Day 12. A knock on my office door that changed everything. Julia Vance was Megan's younger sister, or at least that's what I'd always believed. 28 years old, wild and unpredictable, with a streak of jealousy toward Megan that she didn't bother to hide. She'd crashed our wedding reception by making out with one of my groomsmen in the coat closet. She'd shown up at Thanksgiving 3 years ago with a boyfriend covered in prison tattoos who spent the entire meal glaring at everyone. She borrowed money constantly and never paid it back. Megan always made excuses for her. She had it harder than me growing up, she'd say. Different foster homes, more trauma. I have to look out for her. I'd accepted it because I loved my wife and families are complicated. But now Julia was pushing past my assistant and closing the door behind her, smelling like vodka and expensive perfume. And I was seeing her with different eyes. Ryan. Her voice was too loud. She'd definitely been drinking. I need to tell you something about Megan. About before you. But she can't know I told you. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Sit down, Julia. What's going on? She sat, but she couldn't stay still. Her leg bounced, her fingers picked at her cuticles, her eyes darted around the room like she expected someone to jump out of the walls. The nervous energy coming off her was almost visible, like heat shimmer on a summer highway. Before you, she said, Megan was engaged. To a man named Nathan Briggs. It ended badly. She never talks about it. She mentioned an ex once, said it didn't work out. Didn't work out. Julia laughed bitterly, and for a moment the mask slipped. I saw something ugly underneath. Something that might have been contempt. That's one way to put it. He was obsessed with her. Like, scary obsessed. When she broke it off, he didn't take it well. There were threats, restraining orders. She had to move 3 times. That sounds terrifying. Why are you telling me this now? Julia looked at me, and for a moment the mask slipped further. I saw fear underneath. Real fear, or a very good performance of it. Because I saw him, Ryan. At your wedding. He was there, in the back, watching. The words hit me like a punch to the sternum. That was 6 years ago. I know it sounds crazy. I didn't say anything because I thought I was wrong. But I wasn't. It was him. His face was burned into my brain from everything Megan went through. And if he's the one calling you... I hadn't told anyone about the calls. Not a soul. Who said anything about calls? Julia froze. Just for a heartbeat. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed, then smoothed into something carefully neutral. Nobody. I just assumed. If someone from Megan's past was causing trouble, I figured she was backpedaling, improvising. I let her. Thanks for the warning, Julia. I'll look into it. Just be careful, okay? Nathan is dangerous, more dangerous than you know. She left, wobbling slightly on her heels. I sat at my desk for a long time after, thinking about what she'd said and what she hadn't. How did she know about the calls? Wallace ran the name Nathan Briggs that same night. Male, 41 years old. No social media presence whatsoever. Last known address was an apartment in Portland, Oregon, though the landlord said he disappeared 3 years ago in the middle of the night without taking any of his possessions. One arrest on his record. 8 years ago, a restraining order violation. Filed by Megan Whitmore. The case was dropped 6 months later. No explanation in the public record. This guy's a professional ghost, Wallace said when we talked on the phone. Either he's dead, or he's very good at not existing. Keep digging. I always do. Day 14. I decided to test Megan directly. I staged it as a romantic dinner at home. Cooked her favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted asparagus. Opened a nice bottle of Pinot Grigio. Lit candles. Put on that Miles Davis album she always liked. She came home from work glowing, delighted by the surprise. We ate and talked about nothing. Her clients, my projects, whether we should finally take that trip to Portugal we'd been planning for years. Then, between bites of salmon, I said, "Hey, weird thing today? I was cleaning out the closet and I found an old phone in one of your coat pockets. Didn't recognize it." Megan froze. It lasted less than a second, so brief that anyone else would have missed it. But I was watching, and I saw. Then she smiled. "Oh, that's my old work phone. From before I switched carriers. I forgot I still had it. I should throw that thing away." The phone was less than a year old. The model hadn't even existed when she switched carriers. I nodded. "Makes sense. I didn't try to turn it on or anything. Just wanted to make sure it was yours." "You're so thoughtful." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I love you. You know that?" "I love you too." The words tasted like ashes in my mouth. The third call came at 3:15 a.m. on day 15, but this time something was different. The voice wasn't calm. It was urgent, scared. "Ryan, listen to me carefully. Whatever she's told you, it's not true. She's not the victim. She never was. Check the insurance policy, the one from February. Check who the beneficiary is." I sat up in bed. Megan was at her sister's place for a girls' night. At least that's where she'd said she'd be. "Who is this?" "They're watching me too. I can't." The line went dead. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop and logged into our financial accounts. It took me 20 minutes to find it, buried in a folder of documents I rarely accessed. A life insurance policy. $2.5 million. Taken out in February, 6 months ago. Primary beneficiary, Megan Foster. Secondary beneficiary, Julia Vance. Why was Julia the secondary? Megan had no children. If something happened to me and Megan, standard practice would be to name a charity. My mother. Anyone. But Julia. The two of them. Linked. I started looking at the situation from a different angle. Day 18. Megan announced she was going to a real estate conference in Atlanta. 3 nights. Networking, seminars, the whole deal. She packed her suitcase with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed professional development. I kissed her goodbye at the door, told her to have fun, waved as her taxi pulled away. Then I made a phone call. My contact at the airline, another favor, this one from a former intelligence colleague who'd gone private sector, confirmed what I'd suspected. Megan had booked a connecting flight from Atlanta to Portland, Oregon. Portland, where Nathan Briggs had lived before he disappeared. She wasn't running from her past. She was going to it. I booked my own flight, routing through Denver to avoid any overlap with her itinerary. I landed in Portland 2 hours after her connecting flight touched down and picked up a rental car. The GPS tracker led me to a residential neighborhood about 20 minutes from the airport. Modest houses, well-kept lawns, American flags hanging from front porches. Her rental car was parked outside a white house with blue shutters and a for sale by owner sign in the yard that looked like it had been there for years. I parked across the street, behind a minivan, and waited. 1 hour passed. 2. At 8:47 p.m., the front door opened. Megan came out, but she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her. Tall, dark hair going gray at the temples, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. She was crying. He had his arm around her shoulders, comforting her. Not a lover's embrace. Not the body language of an affair. Something else. I made a decision. Maybe a stupid one. But I was tired of watching from the shadows. I got out of the car and walked toward them. My footsteps were loud on the quiet suburban street. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stop, to go back to my car, to watch and wait and plan. But I was done waiting. Done watching my life from the outside while everyone around me played chess with my future. The man saw me first. His eyes went wide, but he didn't run. Didn't panic. Instead, he stepped in front of Megan and squared his shoulders like he'd been expecting this moment for a long time. "You must be Ryan," he said. "I've been trying to reach you." "Nathan Briggs," I said. It wasn't a question. Megan stared at me, tears still wet on her cheeks. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing. Atlanta conference, wasn't it?" She had the grace to look away. "Inside," Nathan said. "We need to talk, all three of us. It's not safe out here." I followed them into the house. It was sparsely furnished. A couch, a table, a few mismatched chairs. No pictures on the walls, no personal items. The home of someone who was always ready to leave. Nathan gestured for us to sit and disappeared into the kitchen. He came back with 3 bottles of water, still sealed. A small detail that told me he was paranoid enough to worry about being poisoned. I respected that. "Before you say anything," he started, settling into a chair across from us, "you need to understand that everything you think you know is wrong. Enlighten me." He took a deep breath. "Megan and I were engaged 9 years ago. That part is true. What isn't true is anything else you've been told." I looked at Megan. Her face was pale, her hands clasped in her lap. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I discovered something," Nathan continued, "about Megan and Julia. They weren't really sisters. They'd met in a halfway house years before, after both of them aged out of foster care. They created the sister story together, created matching histories, birth certificates, social security numbers, the whole thing. Why? Because they were running a con, had been for years. They'd target wealthy men. Megan would marry them, make them feel loved. And then, after a year or two," he trailed off. "And then what? They'd have accidents, fatal ones, and Megan would collect the insurance money." The room went very quiet. "How many?" I asked. Nathan glanced at Megan. She still wouldn't look up. "At least 2 that I can prove. Andrew Callahan in 2012 married Megan in Nevada under a different name. Fell down the stairs 14 months later. $800,000 payout. Patrick Lawson in 2015 married her in Arizona. Drowned in their pool. $1.2 million. I felt something cold settle into my bones. "And me?" $2.5 million. You're the big score, Ryan. The one they've been building toward." I turned to Megan. "Is this true?" She finally looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't guilt. It was calculation. "He's lying," she said. "Nathan is obsessed with me. He's been stalking me for years, making up stories, trying to ruin my life. I have documentation," Nathan interrupted. "Marriage records, death certificates, financial trails. It's all real. I can show you everything." "Then why haven't you gone to the police?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "I tried, 8 years ago. They got to me first, filed restraining orders, made me look like the crazy ex-boyfriend. I spent 2 years fighting charges that were completely fabricated. By the time I cleared my name, they'd moved on to their next target. And then the next." I sat back and looked at both of them. My wife, and the man she'd supposedly been running from. One of them was lying. The question was, which one? Nathan's files were extensive. Marriage records from Nevada and Arizona under names I didn't recognize. Megan Wells, Megan Grant. Death certificates that matched. Photos of Megan with 2 different men, smiling, happy, in love. Both men were dead now. There was a video, too. Grainy security footage from what looked like a coffee shop. Julia and Megan at a table, heads bent together, speaking in low voices. The audio was terrible, but Nathan had managed to enhance parts of it. "The Foster Project," Julia's voice. "Timeline needs to move," Megan's. "Clean up after is the priority." I watched it 3 times, listened to my wife discuss me like I was a business venture, a problem to be solved. "Why didn't you come to me directly?" I asked Nathan. "Why the anonymous calls?" "I didn't make any calls, not until that one warning about the insurance policy." He looked genuinely confused. "What calls are you talking about?" "The first 2 calls. The calm voice. The amusement. Your wife is mine. You're just a placeholder." If Nathan hadn't made those calls, who had? I flew home the next morning, my head spinning with possibilities. Megan returned from her conference a day later, full of stories about Atlanta that I now knew were fabricated. I played my part. Loving husband. Unsuspecting target. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had Nathan's evidence. I had Wallace's contacts. And I had a new ally, Catherine Cole, a former prosecutor turned criminal defense attorney who'd been looking for a case that would define her career. "We can't just go to the police," Catherine said when we met at her office downtown. "Based on what you've shown me, Megan knows how to manipulate the system. She's done it before. We need irrefutable evidence, not just documentation that she could claim was fabricated, but something that proves intent beyond any doubt." "You're talking about catching her in the act." "I'm talking about letting her think she's winning. Make yourself vulnerable. Give her an opportunity she can't resist. And document every second of it." The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I started working late more often, complained about stress, mentioned trouble sleeping. I told Megan I'd started taking sleeping pills, though the pills I actually took were placebos. I'd switched myself. "Maybe we should update my will," I said one night over dinner. "Make sure you're taken care of if anything happens." Megan looked at me with what I once would have called love. "Ryan, nothing's going to happen to you. Don't talk like that. I just want you to be secure. That's all." That night, I saw her make a phone call from the backyard. 11 minutes. When she came back inside, she was smiling. The burner phone was no longer in the closet. She'd moved it. She was activating something. Julia showed up at my office again on day 28. Sober this time. Controlled. "I need to tell you something else," she said. "About Nathan." I leaned back in my chair. "I'm listening." "He's contacted me, threatened me. He says he has evidence that will destroy Megan, but it's all fabricated. He's been planning this for years, ever since she rejected him." I nodded slowly, giving nothing away. "That's concerning." "Whatever he's told you, it's lies. Megan was a victim, Ryan. She still is. We both are. I appreciate you looking out for me, Julia. I'll be careful." I watched her face as she spoke. The way her eyes tracked my reactions. The way she adjusted her story based on what she thought I already knew. She was fishing, testing, reporting back. I escorted her out with a smile and watched her drive away. Now I knew for certain. The sisters were coordinating. Julia was the handler. Megan was the operator. And I was the mark. Day 30 almost got me killed. I was in the garage, checking under my car for tampering. Wallace's suggestion, after Nathan had mentioned that Patrick Lawson's drowning might have been preceded by some vehicular sabotage. I'd put the car up on a jack to get a better look at the brake lines. The jack slipped. The car came down. I rolled clear with maybe 2 inches to spare, my arm scraping against the concrete as I threw myself out of the way. The car hit the ground with a crash that rattled the windows. I lay there, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling of my garage and wondering if I was going to die in my own house. The jack had been fine that morning. I'd checked it myself, the way I checked everything now. It hadn't been faulty. It had been tampered with. I documented the scene, photos, video. A hidden camera I'd installed weeks ago showed Megan entering the garage that morning while I was in the shower. She'd been in there for 4 minutes, long enough to make sure the jack would fail under pressure. Nathan called that night. He sounded panicked, a far cry from the calm, controlled man I'd met in Portland. "They found me. I don't know how, but they did. I have to move." "Can you get somewhere safe?" "I'm working on it." "But Ryan, there's something else. Something I didn't tell you." "What?" A pause. Then, "Julia isn't Megan's sister. Not even in the fake documentation way." I dug deeper into their histories. They met in a halfway house 12 years ago, that's true. But they weren't just friends. They created everything together from scratch. The family history, the childhood photos, the grieving parents, all of it, completely fabricated. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, her background, her family, her life, was fiction, a performance, a long con that I'd walked right into with my eyes open and my heart on my sleeve. I'm uploading everything to a secure server, Nathan continued. If something happens to me, Wallace knows how to access it. Nathan, the line went dead. Wallace confirmed my worst fears 3 days later. Nathan's Portland house was empty. No signs of struggle, but no signs of life either. His car was still in the driveway. His clothes were still in the closet. But Nathan himself was gone. Either he'd run, or they'd gotten to him. The clock was ticking. I accessed Nathan's files the next day with Wallace's help. Everything was there. The documentation, the marriage records, the financial trails, the video of Julia and Megan planning the Foster Project. But Catherine was cautious. This proves motive and planning, she said. But for a conviction that will stick, we need more. We need to catch them attempting something. Otherwise, a good defense attorney will claim the evidence was manufactured. How do we do that? Catherine smiled grimly. We give them exactly what they want. An opportunity to kill you that looks natural, opportune, and unwitnessed. And then we make sure it's all documented by people who can testify in court. You're talking about using me as bait. I'm talking about ending this, once and for all. I thought about it for less than 10 seconds. Let's do it. The plan came together over the following week. Catherine brought in a detective named Camille Pruitt, a homicide investigator with 20 years of experience and a reputation for not trusting anyone. She reviewed the evidence, listened to the recordings, and gave her assessment. This is compelling, Pruitt said, but it's also circumstantial. Defense attorneys have torn apart stronger cases. What we need is a scenario where they're forced to act definitively, and I need to be there to witness it. So we built a trap. I told Megan that for our 6th anniversary, 2 weeks away, I wanted to take her to a remote cabin, the same place we'd spent our honeymoon, just the two of us. No phones, no internet, complete isolation. She hesitated for just a moment. Then her face lit up with what looked like genuine joy. That sounds perfect, baby. Just what we need. The night before we left, I met Derek for one last drink. The man I'd considered my best friend for almost 20 years. He asked too many questions. The cabin's exact location, our planned itinerary, whether anyone else knew where we'd be. Seems risky, he said. Middle of nowhere like that. What if something happens? Like what? He backpedaled immediately. I just mean, bears and stuff. That night, Wallace ran Derek's financials. There it was. A $50,000 deposit 6 months ago from a shell company connected to Megan's offshore accounts. Derek hadn't been my friend for years. He'd been their inside man, feeding information, helping them understand the legal landscape in case things went wrong. The betrayal was complete. Everyone I'd trusted was compromised. Everyone had been chosen. I'd been alone from the beginning. I just hadn't known it. The cabin was beautiful. 2 hours from the nearest town, surrounded by old-growth forest, with a view of the mountains that would have taken my breath away under different circumstances. Megan loved it. She walked through the rooms with her hands clasped, sighing with contentment, commenting on how perfect everything was. The loving wife, the devoted partner, a performance so convincing that even now, knowing everything I knew, part of me wanted to believe it. What she didn't know, Catherine Cole was stationed in a rental cabin 2 miles away. Detective Pruitt had coordinated with local law enforcement and had jurisdiction connections in this county. Every room was rigged with micro cameras that I'd had installed during a maintenance visit I'd arranged weeks ago. And I was wearing a wire with GPS tracking that would broadcast everything to a team that was ready to move at a moment's notice. The trap was set. All that remained was for her to spring it. That night, we had a romantic dinner. Candlelight. Wine, though I only pretended to drink mine. Megan was relaxed, affectionate, more like the woman I'd married than she'd been in months. "I've been thinking about the future," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "About starting a family. I know we've talked about it, but I really think we're ready now." "Yeah?" "Yeah. I want to build something real with you, Ryan. Something that lasts." I smiled at her, held her hand, told her I wanted that too. Later, as we were preparing for bed, she mentioned a hike she wanted to take the next morning. There was a cliff overlook about 2 miles from the cabin. Incredible views, she said. The drop was straight down, hundreds of feet, but the vista was worth it. "I can't wait to show you," she said, kissing my cheek. I couldn't wait either. I woke at 3 a.m. and found Megan in the kitchen, her back to me, doing something with the water bottles we'd packed for the next day's hike. She didn't see my reflection in the window behind her, but I saw hers. I saw her open a small vial and empty its contents into my bottle. I saw her swirl it gently to mix it in. I saw her put everything back exactly as it had been. She returned to bed 10 minutes later, snuggling against me like nothing had happened. When her breathing deepened into sleep, I got up and switched the bottles. Morning came bright and cold. Megan was cheerful as we laced up our hiking boots and grabbed our gear. Water bottles, granola bars, a first aid kit that she'd insisted on packing. "Ready?" she asked. "Lead the way." The trail wound through the forest, climbing steadily toward the ridgeline. Megan chatted about nothing as we walked. Memories from our honeymoon, plans for the summer, gossip about her colleagues at the real estate office. Normal conversation from a normal wife on a normal vacation. She stopped at one point to admire a wildflower growing through a crack in the rocks. "Look at this," she said, crouching down to touch the petals. "Life finds a way, doesn't it? Even in the hardest places." "Yeah," I said. "It does." She smiled up at me, and for a moment, just a moment, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe Nathan really was a stalker. Maybe the evidence really had been fabricated. Maybe the woman I married was exactly who she'd always seemed to be. Then I remembered the vial, the water bottle, the 4-minute visit to the garage. My bottle remained untouched in my pack. We reached the overlook around noon. It was everything she'd promised. A breathtaking panorama of mountains and valleys, the kind of view that makes you feel small and insignificant against the vastness of the world. And the drop. God, the drop. Hundreds of feet of empty air between the rock ledge and the jagged stones below. "Look at that," Megan said, stepping up beside me. "Isn't it incredible?" "It really is." She moved behind me. I felt her hand on my back. "You know, Ryan, I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "I know." I turned to face her. The mask was slipping, not entirely gone, but cracked. Something cold and calculating showed through. "Know what?" "About Nathan, about the files, about all of it." I didn't react, didn't move, just watched. "I'm not angry," she continued. "I understand why you did it. The calls scared you. Nathan manipulated you. You thought you were protecting yourself." She reached out and touched my face, almost tenderly. "But you don't have to worry anymore. We can fix this, together." "How do you propose we do that?" Her hand moved to my chest. "We go back to the cabin. We call Catherine. You tell her you made a mistake, that the evidence was fabricated, that Nathan tricked you into this whole thing. And then we go home. Start fresh. Try for that baby we've been talking about." She smiled, and it was almost convincing. Almost. "We can still have everything we planned, Ryan. I just need you to trust me." I looked at the woman I'd married. The woman I'd loved. the woman I'd shared my bed with for 6 years. How many others were there? I asked quietly. Besides Andrew and Patrick? The smile faltered. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, Nathan said too. I want to know if there were more. Silence stretched between us. Does it matter? She finally said. And there it was, the real Megan, emerging at last. Cold eyes, cold voice, cold heart. Yeah, it matters. 3 more, early days before I perfected the system. 5 dead men. At minimum. I nodded slowly. I'm not going to do what you want, Megan. Then you're going to prison, for crimes you didn't commit. Her voice was still calm, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Is your pride worth that? This isn't pride. This is making sure you never do this again. The sound of footsteps came from the tree line behind us. Megan's face changed, first confusion, then understanding, then fury, as Detective Pruitt emerged from the forest with 2 county deputies flanking her. Catherine Cole was with them, recording everything on a handheld camera. Megan Foster, Pruitt said, you're under arrest for the murders of Andrew Callahan and Patrick Lawson, and for the attempted murder of Ryan Foster. You have the right to remain silent. Megan's hand moved toward her jacket pocket. I caught her wrist before she could reach whatever was there. Don't, I said. She looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in years. No mask, no performance, just the real woman underneath. You think you've won? She said, as the deputies cuffed her hands behind her back. You found Nathan's files, his evidence, his proof? I didn't respond. Nathan Briggs is dead, she continued, her voice rising. Has been for 3 years. The man you met in Portland was an actor. A very, very good one. My blood went cold. Everything you think you discovered? We put it there. Every file, every video, every piece of evidence. You didn't investigate anything, Ryan. You performed exactly as we designed. Pruitt pushed her toward the trail. Let's go, Mrs. Foster. But Megan wasn't finished. She twisted her head to look back at me, and she was smiling. You'll see, she called. This isn't over, it's just beginning. We checked the server as soon as we got back to the cabin. The files were gone. Every single one. In their place was a video. Julia's face filling the screen, her expression calm and slightly amused. Hi, Ryan. If you're watching this, Megan's been arrested. Congratulations. But here's the thing. You didn't win. You just activated the next phase. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Breaking. Prominent cybersecurity consultant accused of stalking, harassment, and conspiracy to commit murder. Warrant issued. Julia's voice continued. The evidence against Megan? We've already flipped it. Phone records, emails, surveillance footage, all manipulated to show you as the perpetrator. You wanted to be the hunter, Ryan. But you were always the prey. The video ended. I stood in the middle of the cabin, surrounded by my allies, watching my life collapse in real time. The next 3 weeks were a nightmare. I was arrested. The evidence against me was overwhelming. My own surveillance, my own photographs, recontextualized to tell a completely different story. Detective Pruitt vouched for me, but she was one voice against a mountain of manufactured data. Catherine posted bail. We had 72 hours before the arraignment. We need to find Julia, she said. She's the key to unraveling all of this. But Julia was gone. Her apartment had been stripped clean. Wallace tracked her to an airport, a flight to Mexico City, then a connection to Buenos Aires. She'd vanished with approximately $4 million in accounts I hadn't known existed. Megan was the face. Julia was the brain. Megan requested a meeting from jail. Against Catherine's advice, I agreed. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I needed to look her in the eyes and understand how I'd been so thoroughly fooled. Or maybe I just needed to see her in that orange jumpsuit, stripped of her designer clothes and perfect makeup, so I could finally believe it was real. The visitor's room smelled like industrial cleaner and despair. Row after row of plastic chairs faced a wall of plexiglass, each station occupied by families trying to hold conversations across the divide. A toddler was crying somewhere. An old woman was speaking rapid Spanish into the phone, tears streaming down her face. Megan sat on the other side of the glass, wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, no artifice. She looked smaller somehow. Diminished. Like a photo of a photo, the same features but with something essential missing. But her eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. Hungry. I picked up the phone. She did the same. "Hello, Ryan." Her voice was calm. Controlled. Like we were meeting for coffee instead of in a county jail. "You look tired." "Prison will do that to you. The worry, I mean." She laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Still have your sense of humor. Good. You're going to need it." "What do you want, Megan?" "Straight to business. I always did appreciate that about you." She leaned forward slightly. "I can make this all go away. All the charges against you, the manufactured evidence, the frame-up. I can provide testimony that clears you completely." "In exchange for what?" "Let me go. Tell them you made a mistake. That Nathan, or whoever that was, manipulated you. That you were duped into believing a fabricated story." She paused. "I'll corroborate it. We both walk away. Clean slate? And then what? You disappear to Argentina with Julia?" Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, that I knew about the Argentina plan. We'd manage. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I was facing serious charges. The evidence against me was overwhelming. Even with Detective Pruitt's testimony and Catherine's defense, there was a real chance I could spend years in prison for crimes I didn't commit. And all I had to do was let her go. "How many others were there, Megan? The real number?" "I told you, 5 total, before you." "Before me? What about after? What about the next mark?" Something flickered in her expression. Just for a moment. "There was someone else," I said slowly. "You were already setting up the next victim, weren't you? Before I started investigating. Before any of this." Silence. "A widower in Seattle, right? Tech executive. You started the approach 8 months ago." Her face confirmed what Wallace had already told me. "You were never going to stop," I said. "I wasn't the end game. I was just the current project." "Does that change anything?" "Yeah," I stood up. "It means I can't let you go, even if it costs me everything." "Then you'll go to prison for crimes you didn't commit. Is your conscience worth that?" "We'll see." I walked out without looking back. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Wallace had been digging for weeks, chasing dead ends and false trails, spending more hours on this case than any paying client would ever justify. When he called me at 2 in the morning, his voice had that particular quality that cops and investigators get when they finally crack something open. "The real Nathan Briggs," he said. "I found him." "Where?" "Nevada. A psychiatric facility called Desert Springs. He's been there for 4 years." My stomach dropped. "He's not dead?" "Very much alive. Committed against his will after a documented mental breakdown that coincided exactly with when he claims he tried to expose Megan." Wallace paused. "Someone wanted him discredited and locked away where no one would listen to him. Sound familiar?" "We visited him legally, with the facility's permission and Catherine's careful coordination with his attending physician. The man who shuffled into the visiting room bore little resemblance to the confident, healthy man I'd met in Portland. He was thin. Not just thin, but hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything that made him who he was and left only the shell. His eyes had that haunted quality, of someone who'd spent years doubting his own sanity. But when he spoke, he was lucid, completely, heartbreakingly lucid. "They drugged me," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "Made me look crazy. By the time I understood what was happening, I was already committed. I'd scream about Megan, about what she'd done, and they'd sedate me. Every time I tried to tell someone the truth, they'd increase my dosage." He laughed. A broken, terrible sound. "After a while, I almost believed I was crazy. Almost." "The man I met in Portland," I said. "He claimed to be you." "They planned for everything. If anyone ever got close to the truth, they had a backup. An actor, probably. Someone briefed on my story, my mannerisms, my evidence." Nathan's hands were shaking. "They knew eventually someone would come looking. They wanted to control what that person found." "Why not just kill you?" "Too risky. A death would be investigated. A crazy ex-boyfriend in a mental hospital." He spread his hands. "Nobody asks questions. Nobody listens. Nobody cares." He gave us everything. Megan's real name, Sarah Hutchins. Julia's real name, Amanda Torres. The halfway house where they'd met. The early crimes before they'd refined their approach. And most importantly, he gave us a name. "Deborah Stone," he said. "She was in the house with them, saw things, knows things. She ran 12 years ago because she was afraid they'd kill her too." He met my eyes. "If she's still alive, she's your best witness. Maybe your only witness." Deborah Stone was 52 years old and living off the grid in rural Montana. She'd been hiding for 12 years, and when we found her, I understood why. "I saw them kill a girl," she said, her hands shaking as she held her coffee cup. "Back in the house, they made it look like an overdose. I kept my mouth shut because I knew I'd be next if I didn't." "Will you testify?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Will they actually go to prison this time?" "That's the plan." "Then yeah, I'll testify. I'm tired of running." The case against me collapsed 3 days later. Armed with Deborah's testimony, Nathan's statement, and forensic analysis proving the evidence had been manipulated, Catherine tore the prosecution's case to shreds. The charges were dropped. Megan's charges, meanwhile, expanded. 5 counts of first-degree murder across 4 states. Conspiracy. Fraud. Attempted murder. Julia was apprehended in Argentina 6 months later. Extradited. Convicted as a co-conspirator. Nathan was released from the psychiatric facility and cleared of all false charges. Deborah Stone entered witness protection with a new name and a fresh start. And Derek Ashford, the friend who'd sold me out, was disbarred and faced charges for obstruction of justice. It ended on a Tuesday. I stood outside the courthouse after the final verdict came down. Life without parole for Megan. 25 years for Julia. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, and for the first time in almost a year, I could breathe without feeling like something was crushing my chest. Detective Pruitt found me there, watching the sunset. "Hell of a case," she said. "Hell of a year." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What now?" I'd been thinking about that. About all the men who came before me, Andrew and Patrick, and the others who didn't even get names in the newspaper articles about their deaths. About the widower in Seattle who didn't know how close he'd come. "I'm starting something new," I said. "A consulting firm, helping men identify and escape what I almost didn't escape." Pruitt nodded slowly. "There are more people out there like her." "I know. That's the point." My first client was the widower in Seattle. His name was Thomas, and when I showed him the documentation, the pattern, the timeline, the warning signs, he broke down in my office and cried for 20 minutes. He was a good man. 62 years old, lost his wife of 35 years to cancer, lonely and hurting and desperate for connection. The woman who'd targeted him had done her homework. She knew his favorite restaurants, his favorite movies, his late wife's name, and the date of their anniversary. She'd made herself into exactly what he needed, and he'd fallen for it completely. "I thought she loved me," he said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I really believed it. They're very good at making you think that. How could I have been so stupid? I leaned forward, made sure he was looking at me. You weren't stupid, Thomas. You were human. You wanted to believe that someone could love you again. There's nothing wrong with that. The crime belongs to them, never to you. He went to the police the next day. The woman who'd been targeting him was arrested a week later. She wasn't connected to Megan or Julia, but she was running the same con. Different face, different city. Same game. There were more after that. More men. More predators. More patterns to recognize and traps to dismantle. I hired a staff, brought on a psychologist who specialized in emotional manipulation, partnered with law enforcement agencies in 12 states. We saved lives, not with guns or violence, but with information, with pattern recognition, with the simple act of making people see what was right in front of them before it was too late. I never found out who made those first two calls, the ones with the calm voice and the smug amusement. Wallace ran every lead, traced every possible angle, but whoever they were, they'd covered their tracks too well. Maybe it was Julia, testing me before the main operation began. Maybe it was someone else entirely, another piece of the puzzle I'll never complete. Or maybe, sometimes, the universe just sends you a warning when you need one most. I don't dwell on it anymore. What matters is that I listened. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I still hear the phone ring at 2:47 a.m. Still hear that calm voice saying, "You're just a placeholder." He was right about one thing, the caller. It did all end soon, just not the way they planned.